We're Resist. We make nutrition bars designed for blood sugar health and are disrupting the multi-billion-dollar industry of medical foods, specifically Glucerna, which dominates the entire blood sugar-friendly medical food space, and hasn't done any research or innovated their product in a decade. We're making blood sugar health cool again. If you've ever seen those blood sugar-friendly food commercials, it's only old people eating them when diabetes is becoming a much bigger problem for young people. And comorbidity disorders like the ones that I have are intrinsically linked to blood sugar and yet not diabetes. So making these blood sugar friendly foods more accessible is a big mission of ours. But as you can see, a part of this is also education. So people who know about what insulin resistance is or use continuous glucose monitors, there's like 10 different brands right now designing continuous glucose monitors for people who don't have diabetes. So targeting people like that who can understand what these graphs mean, and automatically recognize this branding behind, continuous glucose monitors has been like a huge customer base for us, because they get the product and they get that it works. They can watch it working in real time. So they can watch their blood sugar stay stable. So that is a big customer cohort for us. And as far as success metrics, returning customer rate is a big one for us. We're lucky in that we've had good returning customer rate. At the 30-day mark, it's around 45%, kind of returning again. So really happy about that. But another, success rate or another like metric that we're working on is our flywheel. Like we know that we've reached a point with our organic marketing and our brand partnerships and our influencer marketing where we are just plateauing a little bit. There is growth, but it's like we've, in the past few months, started pivoting more towards retail because we didn't feel like we could keep up with our D2C growth, considering that we weren't doing ads. So invested a little bit more in retail. We're launching into a bunch of stores in January. So we're going from having 35 stores to like 250 stores. And we know that we are going to need to get a big handle on our marketing efforts in order to support those store launches, from a geo-targeting perspective, but also just from brand awareness. So that's kind of setting the stage for where we're at. And then, another success metric, of course, we're like scrappy, bootstrapped founders who want to keep ROAS, healthy, or moderately healthy. And I think in these first 3 months, we're definitely like, we know that this is a testing stage. We're realistic about what that looks like. But, as scrappy founders, we want to always be budget friendly.
Amazing. That's super helpful. And great to hear on that repeat customer. That's also helpful for setting the stage as far as like looking at performance quality from Meta and stuff too, as we dive in.
Awesome.
Cool. Oh, Cam, you're muted.
I also think you're in a really both challenging and unique position because you've got a very real personal struggle that you've built a product and a company around from a Meta ads perspective. It's going to allow you to like create some really compelling messaging because you know the problem firsthand, as is, I guess, with a lot of founders, but you've got like a health and wellness issue that you can speak to firsthand. So like excited to kind of dig into some of these like triggers, emotional triggers, some of the struggles, and help you create some content if that's something that you would like down the road as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's been like a friction point for us as a co-founder team. We like haven't really been able to find a structure for the storytelling that is quick. We always find ourselves like in all of our TikTok and Instagram reel content, been so hard to narrow down the story. And I think a big part of it is just like, we need to oversimplify it and just like focus on one area and we can do that for all of the kind of the different things that we're talking about. But if you looked at our content, you're probably like, this is kind of lengthy. It's kind of long.
Yeah, which is understandable. There's an explanation, an educational component to your product, I'm sure, that you need to translate into your ads. And there's a time and place for all of it. So I can understand the struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the gears turning though. I've worked a lot with like CPG and wellness and stuff like that. So Yeah, happy to dive in and see how we can help. Yeah, as far as kind of directing this session, I want to make it as valuable as possible. Would it be like it could be interesting to even start by looking at like what those learnings from that initial test are for you and what you're seeing. If you're comfortable sharing again at any point, like if you don't want to share anything, we can just move on to something else. But it would be cool to dive in there and see and get some ideas based on that.
Yeah, totally. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And like, tell me if you see any glaring red flags. So this was the first test that we did and broke it
I
down.
love this campaign name.
The emoji in the name too. I like that too.
Also, let me just refresh this page because it is, yeah, there we go. Yeah, I decided to put emojis in all of them because I was like, I feel like I'm gonna have trouble, like, if we're doing like 3 different ads, you know, adding emojis is gonna help me recognize where they are. And so we did basically the same ad with a bunch of different testimonials and then a few different colors. And I truly was shocked that this one, which I did not, like, I thought the orange one was going to do the best because it mostly talked about the functional elements of the product versus this one, which was the only one that got purchases, really just talked about how it tasted and the texture and just that people loved them. So that was an interesting learning that we don't talk as much about like flavor and taste and how good the product is, even though it is, because we're mostly focused on getting the point across that it's, revolutionary product.
Interesting. And like I can say as well, like taste has been something that I've noticed like even in like that kind of crossover as well from testing I've done that does typically show potential at top of funnel in particular. So that's an interesting insight. If you scroll over, I'm interested in some of the secondary metrics too. So maybe, yeah, and if you keep going over, I'm interested in like CTR, CPC. Okay, so maybe if you change your columns to performance and clicks, so that drop down the 3 vertical bar one. Yeah, if you go to that one, it'll be interesting. We can kind of see what's happening with CPC and some of the others. So CPM wise, okay, you're around $40. It's good for benchmarking. Oh, that's a solid CPC at that CPM. And then CTR, nice. Okay, good click-through rate there. And that one does have the highest click-through rate, so that's interesting. Just for kind of helping get a bit of a gauge on it too. And as far as spend, these are in the same ad set. Meta, based on the number of link clicks, definitely prioritized spend to that ad. So the system picked it up pretty quick as well, which is a good sign. As far as like spend as a leading indicator. Yeah, that's pretty cool. The other thing I want to do is, because you guys are in retail and have an organic presence, I want to see if these are click sales or view sales, because that will be valuable as far as getting a gauge on like the kind of tiering of attribution and like truly how impactful it is without like, just layering in confidence if they're all click. So if you click the column drop down again, so that vertical bar one, and then you click on compare attribution settings down there, you can throw 7-day click. If you check that one on and then apply that, it's going to give you, if you go over to purchases again, which I think, yes, if you go to cost per result. So there you go. So those are 7-day click purchases. So they're not view purchases, which is a good sign too. Cool. That's like one of the bigger flags to watch for when you're increasing. Like that's where the risk of overspend really comes, is because often I mean, there is value in view purchases potentially. It's just you start to kind of get into more the like really how like it starts to become a bigger incrementality question. Like, are these actually adding value? And if they're in prospecting, probably more value than say like retargeting view purchases. It's hard to really know if that did make the impact if someone didn't click through. But we know if they click through, then they've engaged with it to a pretty powerful extent. The other thing to watch for is you can always break it down. So I think the horizontal columns there, if you click on that, you can kind of break down by different things. You can break down by placement, which is cool. So you can see where these sales happened. So None of them really look like a flag to me. The kind of right, the right column one is that's typically a pretty big view attribution issue. So if, it's that one like on desktop where if you're on Facebook, it's like way off in the right corner, and it's
Yeah.
if you get a view sale on that, like, do people really see it? That's kind of the question, right? So these are just some tips for like verifying the data in it. But yeah, I mean, that's promising. Their Instagram, Facebook feed got a bit of a mix. So desktop, mobile, like typically we see still on Meta, those are the biggest scale drivers, the feed, even though stories and reels are growing. But yeah, that's a good sign.
Okay. That's good to hear. Also, it's so interesting of like, I didn't even know this was there. I'm like, I'm sure I must have heard of it or seen it or in one of the modules, but I'm like, I didn't remember to do that, to even check. I was like, oh, there's sales. Yay. Good enough.
Yeah, and I think in my last video, I shared a breakdown of some custom ones you can set. So you can go in there and customize those too. There was a lot in that video, so it's an easy one to go back to, though, and set that up for the future as well. And then, yeah, if you scroll back up to that ad that's working, I want to take a look at it. If you click preview, I can then kind of see it's just under the ad sets label up there next to more.
Yeah, go down. Right
There you go. So we can take a look at the ad. Oh, nice. Okay. Very cool branding.
Yeah, and it's just like a very simple, mostly just talks about like being full and like that they taste good.
Nice.
This is a great piece of content.
It's an engaging ad, yeah. And then if you click see more on the copy, I'll just take a quick glance. Oh, nice. Okay, so yeah, you're using the format with the emoji breakdown after the
Yep.
intro paragraph and then the CTA at the bottom. Cool. That's one of my favorites for sure. Nice. Yeah, great benefit statements. Cool. And yeah, this is solid. I don't really have much more to say. It's cool. You've got the question too I like the framing of the question as well through the benefit and the headline. That's probably pretty valuable for getting people to click through. Nice. Okay, this is a good ad.
Thank you. I actually really appreciate that. I was like, is this boring? Like, because it's not a video ad that I feel like I'm used to seeing, or as kind of my age group, I feel like these are like so clearly ads versus like the ones that you see on Reels or TikTok that you kind of like don't know if it's an ad for a second. But that makes me feel good. We made it ourselves, so always good to know that we were on the right track.
Nice. Yeah, and I mean there are pretty big differences too. Like we can break down by age as well to see where those purchases came from as far as demographic goes. That'll be interesting as well. I mean, typically on Meta, you end up with a lower CPM, just like kind of roughly, you end up with a lower CPM for more static style ads. And often the conversion rate's higher, so they can be a pretty good starting place. And then when it comes to video, like working on a lot of hook type testing and stuff like that tends to be a powerful kind of move as you move into those next steps. But yeah, maybe so if you click out of this, I want to break down by some of the demographic stuff too, just to get a better feel for kind of what's happening. So if you go to those ones there, click out of placement, you can go by age and we can see where those purchases are coming from. Potentially, actually, this might be one where no, yeah, we can see it. Okay, so 35 plus.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. This when it comes to setting up like next steps for scale, typically like a tactic we use at Pilothouse, at least like early days, is I tend to this is just a gut check again. I tend to typically see more success from running like broader in the audience setting itself. So like whether that's using interest lookalikes or like just opened up to the geographic, but tightening at the age, like setting age parameters does typically tend to work well. If we do find detailed learnings on it, again, this is pretty early, so like pretty good results out of the gate on this ad, for example. You wouldn't necessarily need to, and it's in a lot of ways there's a lot of value in keeping it opened up, but this is useful just to get a read on as well, especially as you stack more and more up going from here.
Does this align with your customer, like your existing sales data that you have in terms of age demographics?
Honestly, no. Our current customer base really like lives here, 35 to 55. But we have like a whole other customer base that is here, that is just young women versus all of our male cohort is older. Um, I feel like this is surprising to me. Although I will say we have like I think of them as like legacy customers because they've been with us since we like we did like a pilot test for our product when we were still doing scientific research on it. Um, and so we were not like selling it for too much less, but the whole messaging was different. It was really around, we talked a lot about hormone health as far as, insulin is a hormone, but also we got kind of into like the menopause community because your metabolic health really changes as you age. And metabolic health is blood sugar health. Because, things like diabetes is a metabolic disorder, insulin resistance, metabolic disorder, I have PCOS, metabolic disorder. And that community just like really, really loved us. So we have like some of our best customers, like into like the, high spenders, are in this range too. So it could be something that we just dive deeper into of like, clearly their lifetime value is a lot stronger than here. But I think a lot of the organic content we do is of me and my co-founder who are both really young. And I think that our faces, the way that we talk resonates with this crowd a little bit more versus like this is an ad and nobody can see us. And I think it does lend itself to like, I don't know, that we're getting more of that older crowd because I think when you see someone who looks like you, you're like, oh, this product might be for me. Whereas here, I think there's no issue with that. I don't know. That's just an idea. Maybe it could be something else, but definitely needs more testing.
Yeah, it's obviously a very small sample size. So it's hard to pull data this early, but whatever, I was going to take that question. It's good to know. It's good context, Drew. But I guess question for Taylor on behalf of Drew, you're talking about customizing your demographics by age. In a case like this, where you see purchases skewing towards older demographics, like when is the appropriate time to start limiting your audience by age group?
Yeah, I mean, like this is, I wouldn't do it probably after like step one test. I think it would be, especially given that you guys have data like on the organic end that conflicts with like what we see here, like, conflicts in quotations, it's just different. I would probably wait until it looks like it's becoming a pattern as far as like, and that looks different for different brands. The cool thing is, I mean, you can always open up testing alongside. So like you could, for example, at one point get into like a tactical A/B where you're A/B testing all ages versus just a 35 plus, for example, and use the same content and then see what happens. And then if there's clear learning, you could then open it up to different type of content and see what happens. That's probably what I would do, rather, like, at least early on. Like I figure, if you're gearing up for a January launch push, you're seeing promise, like, if this ad looks like this, and you're finding ads that are basically performing within kind of the parameters you have as it's set up, I wouldn't change it out of the gate, because there's also a benefit to having the system help learn on where it thinks it can keep delivering. And I think especially I think the creative type is the big one though. Like to your point, if you're launching UGC with like demographic alignment to some of the younger demos, I wouldn't want to cut that off in that kind of a test. So anyways, does that kind of make sense? It's a bit of a broad answer, but that's how I'd be constantly looking at it and then seeing how it all stacks up over time and then making some calls on test direction based on that. But like it at times can be a pretty big needle mover if we've really locked into a creative that's now looking great in a pretty scalable like part of the demographic base that we have, and then we can kind of keep that going while opening up contrast in the other ones to try to solve those too. Like that's typically how how I would look at it.
Yeah, I love the idea of doing an A/B test here and just like understanding a few different content types versus kind of all we have here really is this, you know, graphic style content versus video. Because I do wonder if there's like a clear difference for the younger demographic with video versus kind of like this is a GIF. But yeah, definitely got to try more. I like love the testing element of this. I think it's like a lot more fun than I was expecting. I think I was expecting a lot more stress and yeah, this is actually has been a really fun experience for me.
That's awesome to hear. That's how I feel about it too. So that's great. Nice. And this is a good segue too, like taking a step back, beyond just this ad, for example. Have you had a chance to kind of dig into some of the like metric patterns across the board or at like a higher level or form higher level like hypotheses based on this test? Like based on the structure of it, like the copy, this copy versus that copy, this angle versus that angle. I know we spoke on some of the creative details, but just interested if you have any thoughts or insights on that as far as kind of framing next steps.
Yeah, I think it definitely has made me feel confident in the kind of GIF style, but it has also made me really think about talking more about texture and flavor and fullness, I guess because that was the ad that really, the pink ad was like truly just about how much people loved it and how tasty it was. And orange was really like, keeps my glucose stable. Almost all of the ads, the testimonials rather that we used there was all about blood sugar versus blue was like taste and also like keeps me full. I guess that might be something that we can continue to test on like maybe people are more interested in satiety than we thought because it has a lot of fiber, it's got a lot of healthy fats, it's got a lot of vegan protein, so maybe people are more interested in that than we had originally expected. So I think that there is some testing to be done there. And then we have already done some tests on our website with the color blue. So I think this kind of like doubles down on like people like the color blue and it works for our brand versus the orange or the pink, that was the exact color palette that we had chosen. Basically, it was an A/B test that we had done for our pop-up. And blue won like every single time. And so did the headline that we used here was also the one that won on our pop-up, which was "Let's balance your snacking, shall we?" And so I think you're probably right. Something about questions keeps people engaged. But as far as like higher level kind of deep dive into what it all means, haven't done so much. I think I do want to go back and take a look at the interests that we chose because it was really hard for us to choose interests because we were trying to do stuff that we couldn't do, which is like interested in blood sugar, which you can't do anything around that. So instead we did biohacking and then we did, I think some stuff based off of like kind of more premium foods. So I'm wondering if there's like a better way to go about choosing interests or if maybe we should be also doing some tests on website visitors or I'm just wondering what the next step is as far as the ad set.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Do you want to go over to one of your interest groups and we can take a look at how that's set up?
Yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing. So yes, let's do that.
Cool. Yeah, if you click on edit, when it pops up there.
Right here or here?
Yep. I mean, yeah, that one either should work for go forward. Okay, so yeah, let's scroll down. Keep going. Nice. Okay, so yeah, actually, let's start here and take a look at this. Nice, you picked off a lot of really good health medical ones. Okay, so yeah, some common ones. These are some of the more like advanced type test ones we do to like some of the I didn't even know about zip codes until I was a couple years into media buying. Like honestly, just from where I've been with Meta, so it's cool to see you pick that one up. Yeah, I've worked with some of these before as well. They're pretty solid. A helpful tip as far as other ones you want to test, if you click the suggestions button there, what it's going to do is it's going to pop up. Like if these are working, it's going to give you a bunch more.
Yeah. Ooh.
So that's a pretty powerful tool. What I like to do sometimes is either group them by like clarity if I'm testing between them. So like I might group the household incomes together and test that against like energy bar and protein, or energy bar and organic food, some different stuff like that. And then, or the other thing we do sometimes is we go by the order that Meta gives us them. So we might pick like the top 5 and test those in a stack against the next 5. And sometimes those become some of the most scalable audiences or audience groups we use. So that's an opportunity on interest. The other one with interest too is if you have GA set up, you can go in there and pull like site-wide audience data. So it's probably just a bit of quick Google searching, but if you run into any issues, feel free to follow up and I can shoot you some like screenshots about where to find it directly. But you can basically get an audience breakdown. They're usually a little bit more broad, but you might find some interesting ones. They might look similar to this, they might look different, and then you can test those too. I usually just label them in my ad set when I test them. And then if we scroll up to the custom audience part, so where you've got your exclusions and stuff. So you're excluding customers and site visitors. So technically you shouldn't be hitting any visitors as long as those are like maxed out as far as that, but it should be pretty aligned. Like site visitor down, you shouldn't technically be reaching with this structure. I think like a big one that, as far as retargeting goes, I like to break up different ones, and there's a couple of tests you could run next that would be really interesting. So this is basically prospecting. On the retargeting front, you could do, I like to kind of group, I mean, the main ones these days are like targeting website visitors and excluding anything kind of downstream. It depends too, right? Like early days, it can be useful to break it up between, say, website visitors, exclude add to cart down, then do like an add to cart and checkout initiate, exclude purchasers. And then, if you're focused on new customer acquisition, you can leave out purchasers for retention. But do you know how to set those audiences up like in Meta? Because I can also help with that if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. I think I remember kind of like as we were going through this that there was an ability to do that, but that maybe we didn't have enough data yet or something, which might have been it.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. So it typically it's like, I think you usually need like a minimum of like 100, and then like 1,000 is kind of the sweet spot. So if you click on the edit portion of the custom audience part, this might be, okay, so you're using an Advantage Plus audience, so that's good to know. If you go down to the include part there, if you click create new custom audience, and then you can pick off which ones you want to use here. So the website ones are going to be websites. This is all pixel based. The other ones that I like just to keep top of mind are video based ones. So you can do, like, as you test video, you can retarget people who watch certain percentages. You can pick which videos. So if you find top performing videos, you can A/B top performing versus all. The Instagram and Facebook account ones are really useful, because you can set up people who've engaged with your page. So it's a really nice middle of funnel play, kind of leans top of funnel, just given it's going to be only from social. You're not retargeting any organic traffic or Google Ads type stuff that you might be doing. But yeah, if you go to a website, if you click on that, you click next, it's going to probably pop up with your pixel. And then, yeah, you basically can set all of this. So you've got 30-day look back. One thing I do like to test right now, it's probably worth keeping it a little bit broader if the audiences are smaller, but as it grows, it's really nice to basically build your own kind of custom funnel in a sense. So you can do like tests based on hypothesis within it, but you can set different day ranges. Sometimes we see a lot of success focusing on like a 7-day window. I mean, I think the typical rule of thumb is most people are highly likely to kind of, the performance is likely to be stronger within the 30-day kind of look back, but you can also go back 180. It depends on the brand. It depends on a ton of different things. What's happening outside of Meta too, like you start to get those complexities. when you're looking at retargeting performance, this is really where looking at click performance is important in my perspective, just to make sure you're looking at something that's actually contributing to the results in retargeting. So when we looked at that, customize the attribution setting, that's going to be important here. But yeah, I think in the course we've got some audience examples listed there. So those are some good starting points to do it. But yeah, this is how you set it up. You just give it a name and then it should populate. You can go over to an audiences tab in Ads Manager. There's the 3 little bars on the left screen there. You don't have to go over there right now, but if you click that, you'll open it up and see audiences, and then you can see how the audience is populating and some details like that. So if you run into any issues with it, you can kind of troubleshoot and get a sense of what's happening over there. Usually I just recommend like setting up another audience. Like if you set up social engagers, it's typically going to be a lot bigger because of all the impressions being served and whatnot versus people who actually click out on the ad. So anyways, that's a pretty quick run through. I know Cam, you're going to send a recording too, but is that helpful as well?
Super, super helpful. I feel like it's the audience thing was definitely the bigger questions that I had today of like, what's next? How do we keep kind of getting an understanding of who we're targeting? And then I guess my other question, and this might be so dumb, my like assumption was that like, as we continue to do ads, we'll be able, like the algorithm will just have an audience for us that it will be able to target based off of its learnings. Is that the case? And is there like a way to tap into that?
Yeah, so that's basically how it's going to try to deliver prospecting for you. So when you set when you set to run it with the purchase objective and you're running kind of any interest group or pocket, Meta is going to basically do its best to say, okay, we know this about the product. We have this purchase data. We have this data even between this person adding like this add to cart signal versus drop off at checkout, all of those types of things when things are happening, when people are on the platforms. Like it's crazy advanced, really powerful algorithm. We've seen it time and time again. Their algorithm is pretty insane. So it's going to basically try to deliver as best as it can based on what it's constantly learning and being fed. So that's kind of as far as tapping into that at like a broad level. Usually a lot of the strategy shared within the course is like our learning about how to do that at scale. So it's but you have layers of control. So like lookalike audiences, you can set those up in that custom area. One that I do want to share is a bit of a kind of interesting one. Like if you guys are running Google Ads, you see really strong performance there. It doesn't always perform on Meta, but it's worth a shot in testing. I'm just going to pull it up. Yeah. When you click on a Google search ad, so like if you search for a brand and you click one of the sponsored ones, typically you're going to see extra parameters come up in the URL. So I'll screen share an example of like a brand here for you guys.
Do you want to just look at a competitor of yours, Drew? Like, I don't know if they would be ranking here.
I mean, I can pull up like even if I search for like liquid death or something, like I'll be able to find. Like if they're running ads in Canada, let's do like Dr. Squatch. So you can see the sponsored ad here. If I click on that.
You want to just zoom in for us a little bit? Oh, never mind.
Yeah, the big thing is what I get up here. So I'm looking for URL parameters. So the big thing is like a GC LID. So you can see this. That is a Google Click ID. Like this is starting to get into some of the advanced audience building, but basically any brand that is running Google ads and seeing success with Google search ads, they're going to pass this through. And you can, in Meta, when you go into that audience builder, you can change the event from just all website visitors to like website. You can basically add specific parameters to it. There's an option to do that. And you can put URL contains. So you can build a custom audience, for example, for your brand of people who are clicking Google ads. And then you can build a lookalike on that. so that you can essentially create like a Google, like more of an intent-based lookalike. There's different things you can do like that. So there's some of the other ones that tend to perform quite well are like if you're using Klaviyo for email, setting up the Klaviyo audience sync, and with Meta, there's a direct sync for that, and then pushing segments in and building lookalikes based on those. Like there's a ton you can do. Shopify audiences too. There's an app that Shopify has called Audiences. If you search for that, you can find it. Those typically show a lot of promise and performance signal too. So yeah, there's a kind of a whole world of audiences. Those are probably like outside of using, purchase lookalikes and some different things like that. Those are kind of like the key ones that we typically would look at. But yeah, some cool tips you can kind of tap into there as well.
Yeah. So
I've
when
got a
you
question.
Oh,
Sorry,
Brian, go ahead.
Would you mind? No, I've been listening and it's been really good, Drew. Super cool to follow what you're doing. And I was curious, in the audiences, just before we leave that topic, basically, how much do you guys look at? So there's all this sort of targeting that you've gone through. Those are Facebook segments or different kinds of criteria that they predefine. And one of the things we've done just using some of the methodologies you guys teach and have found it's kind of arbitrary, but if you have space for testing, it was just finding brands, could be publishers, for example, or that have big followings. And how much do you guys look at those where you see a demographic connection between followers of really connected brands? Let's just say, I'm trying to think for Drew, could be a health and wellness publisher. How much are you tapping into those kind of audiences when you're prospecting and trying to find segments? Because just as an example, and we found some really wild correlation. So one of our clients is a premium consumer packaged goods brand for Indian sauces and lassis drinks that you buy in the yogurt drinks you buy in store. And so we were testing things like travel brands, travel publishers, and we were finding really efficient audience segments inside things that were tangentially related. Some of it was like food specific, but some of it was not. I'm just curious how much of that type of audience you look for to get outside of Facebook's kind of predefined or Meta's predefined segments. Yeah.
That's a great question. We do it pretty often. Yeah, I would say it's a little bit case by case, but for me, like within my portfolio, it's pretty standard that I'll go in and review those like in an onboard or at different kind of points in time to take a look at like, are there relevant pages or topics that are large enough that Meta's created that pool that we could set them up in the interest target. Seen some pretty good results from that type of strategy and looking at segmenting either pages or brands in those interest groups. So yeah, would echo what you're sharing, and it's cool.
As you said, it's kind of unlimited. It's so big, but it's an interesting way to get outside the box a little bit. And you might find some low performers, but some surprising high performers. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I really like your point about the contrast there too, because it is easy for it does happen sometimes that the algorithm seems like it's just moving in a direction, and it's like, what do we need to do to steer that a different way to maybe see if we can drive a bigger set of results rather than just this kind of iteration. Here we are, like increasing a little bit. It's a good strategy. Like we do it with creative all the time, but it's easy to miss that on the audience front, and that is like essentially the same thing, like on contrast rather than iteration. So it's a really good call out.
Cool.
I have a similar question as well along audiences and kind of the idea of targeting other people's audiences. And I think, well, a part of it is using that URL, how you use it and which part of it you take. Is it everything after G-CLID? And is it something that you plug in then to Facebook, because it's something, for context, we have just noticed an association between people who love our product and people who use continuous glucose monitors. So if we could target like Levels or NutriSense or any of those companies, it's not a competitor, but it is definitely like that kind of audience is who we're looking for.
Yeah. So, and just to clarify, so the GCL ID, if you guys are running your own Google Ads, you'll be populating data on your URL that the pixel is picking up. So it's basically a way for, I would then, like, you can either target that, it'll be specific to your brand, the GCL ID portion. But what I like to do is build like a lookalike on that, because typically, like, if people are searching and you're, winning search competitive ads, basically, like your ads are beating out other competition on search, and you're getting those like intent driven clicks, Meta's then going to start looking for more people like those intent driven clicks. So that's like it's more of like a owned high quality lookalike opportunity. The competitor portion, usually it's going to be based on what isn't available in the interest targeting section. So you'd be surprised sometimes, like sometimes the bigger ones I'm looking for aren't there, but then the smaller ones are, and it's kind of weird, like how Meta populates it sometimes. So it's one of those ones where, like, my typical run through with it is I try to build a pretty big list of ones I want to look at, and then cycle through and see what's available, and then work with kind of what I've got on that in that regard. But with the URL stuff, like, you can do a lot. Like if for example, it's pretty common that, like, if you're using UTM parameters in your ad settings to track, you can basically do the same thing. Like, you can set up like UTM underscore campaign equals like whatever the name is that's going to be set for it and what would likely pass through the URL. You can set that up as a lookalike if it's doing really well, for example, and you want to go after a little bit more specifically in terms of directing the algorithm. We typically don't go way too down that path. I would say, like, unless it's like a really specific kind of niche case, or we're really feeling like we're not seeing delivery signal aligned to what we're looking for, but we're really confident in the creative, we're trying a lot of contrast there. Like, based on what we're seeing out of your early pilot test results, that probably isn't going to be super necessary based on the signal I see. Like, it looks like you're in a really high quality CPM group, really good CTR and interest signal coming through immediately, purchases coming through immediately. Probably makes more sense to kind of follow a more aligned to Meta updated best practice approach of like a little bit broad group, interest groups, and then lookalike stack groups, typically being a little bit broader, like purchase, Shopify audiences, Klaviyo owned, if that's, or like email CRM tool sync. But yeah, it's a good question. That's hopefully that helps. I realize that was a bit of a long-winded answer too.
No, it does. It does. We'll see how much of that I'll be able to actually implement, but I might ask you again a little further down the line to get some clarification on some of that stuff, just because, yeah, I think the kind of targeting people who've, been in our email system is definitely something we'd love to look into. And yeah, I'll definitely follow up with that one.
Getting closer to first party. Can I throw a couple of other questions out that I was just curious about? These are this is just specific, but I'm specific to my scenario. But I'm curious, with the pilot testing methodology, I'm coming into a new partnership with a client, so they've got plenty of existing their own process, and we're definitely planning to introduce a pilot test in the new year. They're using Advantage Plus almost exclusively for their testing. Let's throw 5, 10, headlines, 10. They're just stacking up creative to test in the wild in a big bunch. And I'm curious how you look at that. So the because the algorithm can go down, just kind of start sniffing down an angle and go with it. How do you guys contrast kind of this granular approach where you're really seeing each individual, because you're manually, you're controlling the variables, you're seeing the variables in a much more isolated manner than, say, throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall simultaneously. Net, are you testing these Advantage Plus against those tests, and what do you see? And I'm just curious how you contrast those two things with each other.
This is
Yeah.
a great question. I had this as part of my my deck for today too. So this is great. Yeah, because like my perspective on it is there are cases where we will test in CBO where we have less control than ABO, or we'll test in Advantage Plus, given the nuance that we see in the account. So like if, warmed up account, you already have a ton of data. Like one test that I've been running actively on my end recently is basically a pilot test for a new product push that I want to make with a brand. And I'm doing both ABO and also a CBO version in that case, just given some of the nuances in that account. But I've also worked with brands where we see like Advantage Plus, like there's sometimes a growth curve too. Like Advantage Plus is a different algorithm from what we understand. I mean, as far as like what we typically see, like faster social proof building, quicker kind of results out of the gate, but less control, less clarity on just how much of that is totally net new, all that kind of stuff. So typically, like I tend to frame it through like what's going to be most valuable for me to figure out, like are they in a position where their retargeting is really strong, but their prospecting isn't, and we need to crack the code in prospecting. That might be a good case for probably leans more the ABO route, or like a max exclusion scenario. Like, so you could use CBO as kind of the intermediary in that case, but maybe we do typically see that the algorithm's pretty dialed to spending where it should be. And in that case, and we want to move fast, then I've launched the CBO. But in a lot of cases, I'll A/B both, honestly. And I think using spend as a leading indicator is pretty valuable in a lot of cases because of how advanced Meta's algorithm is. That's a bit of an all over the place answer, but I basically kind of go qualified signal and A/B. Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, I'm just curious how to contrast, kind of bringing a new methodology into the mix, and we, for a lot of our creative tests, shit, there goes my coffee. Got it. We've leaned on that pilot strategy, and so it's just versus getting them to fight against each other or battle against each other. And so I was curious if you'd done that, or, I mean, to me, it's just another layer of testing. And so they're both valid. They both have, kind of strength, I'm sure, but I was just curious there.
And the most common way I do it is probably pilot first, battle second. Typically, like I kind of do a 1-2, but there's a case to do both at the same time or modify the pilot test for sure. So yeah, that's a really, really good question.
Cool. I think we're coming up to it, aren't we?
Yeah. Thanks for joining, Brian. I was saying to Drew before you joined, I think I shot myself in the foot a little bit by sending out that we canceled the 28th session just because I assume that quite a bit of people are going to be on holidays or attendance will be low. So I have a feeling that people saw that email and said, "Oh, today's canceled. I'm out." But it worked out actually quite well. So we got into the weeds.
Yeah.
With Drew's brand, and I think
I know
more valuable
like
the group that is here. So
yeah, totally. No, love this. I'm definitely. We're onboarding a new client that, basically came to us, I don't know, 2 weeks before Black Friday and said we need to start over. So all the way through the holidays. So it's been hard for me to dive into the course. So I'm all in. I will be here. I want to take advantage of this. I know it's so awesome just to listen to you walk through, Drew. All those things are relevant to all of us. We're all working with the same dynamic, so it's super, super helpful to hear what your advice was there. And looking forward to more of these.
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna pick things back up on, I think it's the 11th.
Great.
I think the plan for January is bringing Nate on, who you guys haven't met yet, but he is the last module in the course that talk a little bit more about kind of advanced scaling stuff. And I know I think majority of people in the group that might be a little bit later stage. So I think we'll focus on the first half of his session, which is, bidding types, when to use them, some of the more rudimentary, and then we'll focus on the latter half of his module in later sessions. And then we'll also focus a little bit more on creative and content strategy in January and start to talk about some creative. And Drew, I'm super excited to see what you do as a next step with your content with your ad account, because I think you got so much going for you.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
And like really, really happy that today worked out the way that it did, selfishly, but it was incredibly helpful. And Brian, I feel like you had questions that I wouldn't even have thought to ask. So happy you popped in, and yeah, have a great holiday, everybody.
Yeah,
Likewise.
one other thing, Drew, just as a side note, we did run some interesting tests on a bar brand of a client of ours. That was one of our first things we did with the last course. And so got some really interesting insights. So I'll think about not exactly a direct crossover, but the brand is Jam Bar. And so we had some really interesting creative insights that I could share with you that could be useful in just totally, I can share it. They're not a client anymore, but you can see stuff on our website, and I can share with you kind of some of the insights we had creatively that you might want to try.
That would be awesome.
So,
I will definitely take you up on that. So yeah,
cool.
Whatever works. I'm sure I could find your information in the call details. So I'll send you a follow-up.
Yeah. Cool. All right, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so much, guys.
Have a good one.
See ya.